Well, good day to you. It is December the 10th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. And also, just mention to you, if you've heard these videos before, that's okay. I'm just going to tell you again. If you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, if you want to get some really good background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom or his priorities, or if you want to even see if there's any truth to this channel is not the end-all and be-all of the information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Not even close. There's so much more information out there that can help you understand this information better for yourself, even see if there's any truth to it. So if you check out the description portion of every one of my videos, there are links that take you to websites that talk about this information in some way. So hopefully you'll check it out because they're all free and they are, I think, very helpful in terms of investigating this information for yourself. So hopefully you'll look into it. Now, if you want to join the discussion and let me know what you think, post comments. I'm always glad to hear what you have to say. You can post your questions in the comments section, or you can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. Now, I had two comments that I love. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't love every comment that comes my way, but there are some comments that get me thinking, help me to understand what I want to say in the next video, that aren't particular questions per se, but they're enough to the comment that we can learn more about this information, right? Other comments, I like what you had to say, I didn't like what you had to say. I mean, I appreciate those too, but there's not really much I can go on in terms of discussing anything about it. But Mr. Freeland 123, what they said was, got me thinking. I've always been quite spiritual, was raised a Christian, but saw far too many of what I would call Sunday Christians, i.e., they would go to church one day a week and not be very nice the other 6 days. My main problem with the mainstream religions is I'm certain the teachings have been manipulated over the centuries by humans, maybe to cause divide. I don't like the whole if you don't believe in our way, you will burn in hell type philosophy. Even though Christianity and Islam suggest this, I've met amazing Muslims, Rastafarians, Christians, etc. I like to think if there is a God, he judges on one's heart. How can a God-fearing good person, not believing Jesus is the Son of God, for example, hope this makes sense. It does make sense. In fact, it makes so much sense that Mr. Freeland 123, that I'm going to use some words that I don't typically use when trying to address a comment or answer a question. But I agree 100% with what you're saying. I don't like to use the words agree or disagree when talking about this information because it's really not about that, so because people disagree with me all the time and I'm fine with that. But if I was really big into agreeing and disagreeing, well then shoot, then that creates a division in and of itself. But did you know that 123 is the square root of 15,129, Mr. Freeland? I'm kidding. That's probably a little known and even less cared for fact. But no, a couple of things that Maitreya said, one to me personally and one that I read in one of the books that Benjamin Creme published, that he was quoting Maitreya. Okay, so the first thing is what he said to me about judging. Okay, now, the time that this happened it wasn't too long before the announcement was made that he had given an interview on TV. And this is important because one of the things he said in there was, he said, you'll see me on TV real soon and we're going to change the world together, is what he said. So that's how that relates to the television interview. But the one thing that he relates to, what he said that kind of relates to what you're saying, is he said, I never judge anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. Now, when I first heard that from him, I knew it was Maitreya because he was saying things back to me that I had said to him in prayer a few days prior to this. And it came back on the street in Marietta, Georgia from a very young, very nice looking African-American man. And so I could tell it was him. I could tell it from his love and his vibe and just the look in his eyes and everything. I could tell it was Maitreya. And the fact that he repeated what I had said or answered what I had said to him as a comment. So for instance, the reason why he said, I never judge anyone, I only notice the good things that they do, is because a few days prior to that, I had said to Maitreya at a kind of a low point one night, as I said, I can't even call myself your disciple. I don't do anything. By all stretches, I'm not even a very decent human being. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because I'm overcritical. I was critical at the time of myself, probably more than I was of other people, but I was a pretty critical person at that time. And so when he said this to me, my initial thought was that he was responding to what people think Jesus to come back as, or the Christ to come back as a judge, to judge the wicked and the dead. You know what I mean? To separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, of humanity. And the chaff goes into hell in this furnace for the rest of eternity, and the good ones get to go live in heaven forever. That's the popular view, right? That's what you're kind of addressing in your comment. But he was saying, no, that's not what he is a judge, right? That's my initial take on what he said. But then, and this is where I think Christians get it wrong, is they take everything that about Jesus to be about Jesus. Okay, so I took that to mean about him, that he's not a judge, right? Now, here's where that changed my life. Because up until this point, that what he had said had not changed my life. It wasn't until I started to apply it to myself and those in my life that it changed my life. So I started to notice people, and it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago maybe, that I started to do this. I can't remember exact time. It doesn't really matter, but it was a ways in time from when I first heard it to when I started to think to do this, to apply it to myself. But I did it with somebody at work who I was having difficulty with. I found him to be rather arrogant and brash, condescending, all that kind of stuff. And people that I just don't like to hang out with. But I had to hang out with him because he was a coworker of mine. So what this thought came across my mind was, remember what Maitreya said? I never judge anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. Why don't you try that with him? That was the thought that I had, right? I was like, well, shoot, I'll try it. And I noticed a couple things that he did good at work, right? And at the time that I was like, okay, fine. No, he did this and he did that. And yeah, he's kind of brash and he's an arrogant a-hole and all that kind of stuff. But, he at least did this. This is kind of how it started. And then it made me feel better about him. And then I noticed that over a few weeks of this, I started to notice that he changed his attitude toward me. He stopped being so condescending and he was a little bit more down to earth and more real with me. And then I was like, I kind of like that. Can I try it with this person? So I tried it with this person, and then I tried it with that person. And over time, it took time, I started to notice a change in the way that I saw other people. But yet, Christians in and of themselves, you talked about the Sunday Christians, they just believe in what they believe. They don't apply the teachings of Jesus to themselves, because they don't think that they can even possibly get there, because Jesus is up on a pedestal in heaven. They are down here. They can't ever achieve where he's at, even though he said in the Bible, it's quoted in the Bible, him saying, greater things than this shall you do yourself, talking about the miracles that he was doing. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? That's the other line, right? So if you want to be as loving as Jesus, you got to start somewhere. And you can't go from being a critical person like I was to being loving people unconditionally. You got to work at it moment to moment, day by day. It's a path that you have to take. Maitreya being the Christ, it's said from the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, we don't understand how arduous of a path it took from him being one of humanity to not only manifesting the love nature of God, the divinity within him, but embodying it like the Christ. Not all masters do that, but he had to work toward it. It took millions of years for him to get to that point. Literally millions of years, not hyperbole, But if it's something that you want to do, you can do that. It's just you have to work at it. It takes lifetimes over and over again, making mistakes, coming back, making mistakes, coming back. But the other thing that he said, and this I think has to do with people's belief in God. And this is what I read in one of the books, and you can read this too if you get one of Benjamin Creme's books that he talked about. He quotes Maitreya. He has some Maitreya quotes in there. The one thing that he said that it just makes so much sense, he says, as man so relates to man, does man relate to God. Now, it doesn't really mean much until you really, I think, pull it apart and start looking at it and analyzing it. historically as from humankind to our own selves, right? So, for instance, God to the ancients was a hunter. They prayed to God, whether it was the sun or the moon or whatever, to give them a good feast, to give them a good hunt. How many times have you prayed to God for a good hunt? You know what I'm saying? You don't, because you're not a hunter, right? Now, if you are a hunter, you might, right? Other people pray to a God that is critical and angry. But if you look at that person, they're very critical and angry. If you're somebody like such as yourself who's starting to be more tolerant of other people, well, guess what? I think God might be a little bit more tolerant. I use my mom as a textbook example of this. She is a middle-of-the-road politically. Now tending to lean a little bit more to the left because she doesn't like Trump. But overall, historically, that's where she's kind of landed, is in the middle of the road. She was raised Methodist. She's not a Bible thumper, but she believes in Jesus as the only true Son of God. But she also doesn't believe, she kind of believes like you, well, what if somebody was a good, decent person that didn't necessarily believe what I believe? Does that mean they're going to hell? That's kind of how she puts it. I don't think they are going to hell. I think I think they can still get into heaven, those kind of things. That's what she thinks because she's like that. Do you see what I'm saying? That's her God. My God is somebody that's evolving, just because I view myself and those around me as evolving to a higher state of being. God allows us to do this. Other people don't believe that. You know what I'm saying? And then my God wants peace on earth, through sharing, wants to see the end of hunger. Why? Because Gary wants to see those things. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how this correlates with everything? And then if you look at the fundamentalist Christian right politically in the United States, I can talk about this because I follow politics quite clear, I follow it a lot, here in the United States. Maybe not so much in other countries, but here in the United States, I'm up on it. And the Christian right, who's kind of getting into politics, over the last, 40, 50 years, God is a Republican. Jesus is a Republican. Jesus loves capitalism. I don't see Jesus as that. Everything that I've read in the New Testament would indicate, if it was historically accurate, would indicate that he is not a capitalist. In fact, I think there's probably some things that Jesus did and said, right, that a lot of communists wouldn't agree with because it's too selfless. Give of all your wealth to the poor and follow me. That doesn't sound very capitalistic. You know what I'm saying? That sounds like the exact opposite of capitalism. Wouldn't it? Wouldn't you agree? But yet people relate and they see in the Bible, and because we see what we want to see, then when we read the Bible, that's what we see. And then we say, okay, well, if you're not a Republican, well, you're going to go to hell. There are people talking like this now. So it makes no sense to me. But was it put there to create a divide? I think it was put there to create a divide between humanity and God, when there really is no division between the two. We're all one and the same. We all share that same divinity. That's the other thing that the masters will tell us, is that divinity, we're all sharing it. Maitreya and these masters, as when we see them, when we experience their love and wisdom and simple honesty and the humor that they have and the joy that they experience moment to moment, we will see that is us in potential, not that they're separate from us. The unity and the oneness that they will be, nothing that they will say will be divisive at all. I don't think we've ever experienced that really, what I'm saying, as any one of us. To hear somebody on TV or see him in our life or something, or speak to a large crowd speaking nothing but unity and love with no division, no pretense at all. You know what I'm saying? I think it would be quite an extraordinary experience to hear it and to feel the reality of it, because they will be speaking the truth that we are one. There is no division between any one of us. The names that we use to describe the weighted teacher, Maitreya, the Christ, the Imam Mahdi, the Kalki Avatar, the Messiah, Maitreya, when he's been approached by people in the Asian community of London, are you the Imam Mahdi? I've been hearing that you might be. Rather than just saying, yes, I am, he says, those are just names that people refer to me as. But they cause confusion within the minds of people because of the ideological differences that we all have about ourselves, about God, about the teacher that we are awaiting to come back and those kind of things. But they cause confusion. That's why he says, just look to me as a teacher, because he goes, that's really who I am. But he's a teacher for all of humanity, not just for one group of people. If you don't believe me, look at the Share International site. You'll see miracles that have been happening for decades to every single religious group, giving people hope for the future. That hope for mankind is for all of mankind. I think that the miracles that are going on are evidence of oneness. Nobody really looks at it like that, but I do. I think they're evidence of oneness. And then if you're masochistic and you want to really dive into the problems of the world, like the environment, they're also telling us that we are one, and evidence of oneness, because they're affecting each and every one of us without exception. Whatever corner of the planet we're on, it's affecting us. It doesn't matter how much money we have, how famous we are, how uneducated we are, how smart we think we are, how, whatever, right? Though the environment and the pollution is affecting us. And it's going to take each and every one of us doing something, whether it's a lot or a little, to solve that problem. Not one person can do it. Not one nation can do it. Not one group of people can do it. It's going to have to be every single person doing something to save the environment. It will bring us together in a way that we can't possibly imagine, facing our own annihilation from the misuse to the environment the way we've been doing. But that's why the teacher is here, to show us that this is the choice we have. That's the first thing that we're going to get from Maitreya, really, is a choice. Do we continue on in the same ways that we're doing and kill ourselves and have no future on this planet forever? Or simply take a step back by just trying the principle of sharing. That will bring about justice and bring about trust amongst the nations and eventually bring about true and lasting peace on this planet and give us a future. It's the choice that we have to make, That's why those people who have heard this information before, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to follow some kind of regiment. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to give any money to anybody. It's just, hopefully you're inquiring in your daily life about the need for peace and how important it could be. So when we are presented that choice by Maitreya, you're already years ahead of most people that will have to think about it on the fly. You know what I'm saying? You'll be like, yes, I'm ready, because I see that we need to do this. It's a necessary thing. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, thank you very much for the comment. And it got me thinking, Mr. Freeland 123. Now I had another one that I wanted to talk about from, is it Pudinky 80? Hey bud, I've been listening to your channel a long time. There's a lot of O's in that, so it must have been a long time. I rarely comment. I became fascinated with Maitreya and or Ascended Masters and Benjamin Creme and the world of opening your mind through strange roots like William Cooper, Fritz Springmeier. You get the picture. Coming from an Irish Catholic, Roman Catholic family, educated through university by Jesuits, I began my reading and learning more because I found it interesting than because I was a Christian zealot. I've since left the Catholic Church for obvious reasons, but the more I dive into an interest in theosophy and occult, and how synchronicity of all things from fallen angels to aliens, but I always return to your channel because you have quite possibly the most humble delivery of your knowledge, while never arguing or chastising or attempting to shame one of your detractors or subscribers alike. Regardless of if the Maitreya is a physical being, an actual flesh and blood human, an ascended master, or friggin' Antichrist, I find your channel very centering, and it helps me find my own grace in life and journey for truth. My search for signs, you might say. Thank you for that. I don't think I believe a good portion of what you do, but I friggin' respect how you present your own journey and message. Well, thank you. That is such a kind thing to say. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter to me whether people agree with what I have to say. That's what I was just saying early on in the video. You know what I mean? It's about you realizing that you're in your own way from what I'm taking from what you're saying, I could be wrong, but from what I'm taking from what you're saying, is you're finding your own path to oneness, to understanding that we are one. You know, growing up in a Christian church, if you're in the Western Hemisphere, you got about a 90% chance of being indoctrinated by Christianity in some way. You know, whether it's for or against, you know, but it's always been a main topic of discussion when talking about spirituality or God. You know, I don't think I've ever had a discussion with anybody about God without Christian roots and Scripture in some way coming up, whether it's they agree with it or they don't. You know what I'm saying? Now, in terms of agreeing with me or not, I say this a lot, but it's true. You know, and I think it's funny, but there's a lot of my Share International friends who I've known for years and perhaps haven't spoken to in years, but have come across this channel and have said, "Oh, I really like what you have to say. I don't agree with everything you have to say." You know what I mean? And it's okay. You know, I would say for the most part, it's best to look at, if you don't agree with what I'm saying about Maitreya, if you're a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist atheist, it doesn't matter. Just be a fundamentalist atheist or a fundamentalist Christian and want to see the end of hunger, want to see the end of peace, you know, want to see the end of war and see peace and those kind of things, and how to do it. That's why I always recommend checking out the site about the Marshall Plan. That's not a religious site. You know, the YouTube page that talks about it doesn't even talk about it from this standpoint, but you can do your own research and look, and what Maitreya is saying is true. Without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace, right? And then is it true that the Marshall Plan was a form of principle of sharing that took place, right? Well, it had to have been. This is what Ben said. It was actually the first time that humanity ever tried the principle of sharing, is what he said. But it had to have been based on the results of it, because the result, whether it was their initial intention or not, I don't know. Whether George C. Marshall knew what he was doing consciously or had just stumbled across one of the most incredible discoveries of humanity of all time, the principle of sharing. Was it put there by one of the masters? Did one of the masters come and talk to him in some kind of guise and kind of guide him on the way? I have no idea, right? All I know is this man who was a war guy, right, came up with his group of people, with his advisors, the principle of sharing, where the United States gave excesses of their resources to Europe to help Europe out, because they knew that if they didn't, there was a very strong likelihood that we would go back into another world war in Europe. And at this time, Russia and the United States both had nuclear weapons. That would have been disastrous. So they went in there to stabilize everything in Europe, and by doing that, they didn't just give them the aid. They gave excesses of what they had. And then once Europe started to rebuild and started to create excesses for themselves, because it's a pretty wealthy continent, they gave back in payment what they took. That's the principle of sharing. And then if you look at the result of it, it led to a form of peace. It's not perfect. It's maybe not what everybody would consider peace to look like, where everybody's standing on a mountaintop holding hands singing Kumbaya, my Lord. It's a functional peace. It's goodwill amongst the nations. It's the lowest level of peace. But even though it only lasted for just a few years, it's continued to maintain that peace within those nations. It's quite extraordinary. And yet no historians look at it like this. No politicians talk about this as a possibility of solving conflicts in the world, right? But we did it as the United States, as dysfunctional as this country is, as divided as this country has always been. It did it, you know, and it was the only time that our soul of this nation manifested. And yet the world now is waiting on the United States to manifest its soul, because they know that we have it within us to do it. But yet we beat everybody else over the head right now. That's all we do. And now there's so much infighting between the right and the left, between this racial group and that racial group, between this ideology and that ideology, and blah, 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 that not much is getting done, right? But those divisions are here because we have to see who and what we really are for us to make a choice, the right choice, the choice for humanity. is what Maitreya is going to give us. Like I said earlier, do we continue on in the ways that we're doing and end all life on this planet, or do we try the principle of sharing and see what happens, and possibly give us a future, And then based on historically what happened with the Marshall Plan, then I think it would, right? Now, you had mentioned the friggin' Antichrist. I wanted to read something. I haven't done this in a while. I've been reading flat out reading Benjamin Creme's Master's articles. I haven't really read just a little bit of it, just for us to kind of think about something. But I don't know if I'm going to read this whole article. I'm just going to read a bit of it. But this is the article, The Coming of the Great Lord by Ben's Master, that was published in Share International in 91. He said, "For some, the coming into our lives of Maitreya augurs naught but fear, disaster, and other portents of doom. They see him as the arch-fiend, the Antichrist, and tremble at his name. So distorted is their understanding of their scriptures that they see the manifestation of God's representative as the embodiment of evil. Thus it was in Palestine long ago when Jesus taught his simple law of love. Among his adversaries then were many who now await with dread Maitreya's appearance. They recognize again the intonation of love, but conditioned by fear and misunderstanding, prepare to reject it as false. When Maitreya makes known his presence and role, they will find to their astonishment that he means them no harm. On the contrary, they will discover his love for those who fear and oppose him equals that for the multitudes who will welcome him with open hearts. They will find, too, that gradually their fear and dread will soften into a growing recognition of his divinity. Step by step, their doubts and fears will change into admiration and eventual trust, and his counsel and advice will they eagerly seek. So will it be. Pockets of opposition may persist for long, but in time, all but the most bigoted will accept him as teacher and friend. When they do, they will find in him a counselor and guide, who will take them into the understanding of their own divine origin and nature. He will free them from fear, which blinds them now, and enable them to savor the reality of being, untrammeled by doctrine and dogma. Many there are who fear the coming of the Lord of love. Their own experience of that love will set them free. Within weeks, many for themselves will hear and see the great Lord. They will know and recognize him and establish him in their hearts. News of their experience will travel far and wide and awaken humanity to the miracle in their midst. In their own tongue, he will outline his proposals and views and seek their cooperation and help. In this way, a new climate of expectancy will be created by Maitreya himself. This will lead directly to the day of declaration and the beginning of his open mission. He will seek to allay the fear of those who see in him the advocate of evil, Satan's henchman. He will succor and heal them and bring them to his fold. He will present to them the Master Jesus and other masters, and thus remove the doubt born of their confusion. Thus will it be, and thus will the Lord of love complete his task, bringing eventually all the sons of God under his divine tutelage. You guys have a great day. I love you very much. Talk to you soon. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.